So because this meeting is being recorded, that means you will all receive a link following the session. And this actually will also be posted on Sembra's YouTube channel. And this is the reason why we wanted to make it kind of podcast meets webinar so that we could create a library for everyone to look at, conversations, because we will be aiming to bring very visible, notable leaders. And the whole goal is to have them accessible to everyone and make sure that we provide that consistent experience and accessibility. So with that, I will just start a little bit of an intro here. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jasmin Zamora. I am the president and founder of Sembra. We are an organization focused on creating equity in our communities so that people can grow where they are planted. We partner with companies, businesses, and of course, our local community to create experiences that promotes connection, growth, and advancement. Hence the name Growth Series. This is a new series. Today is episode 1. And this series really, again, is aimed to bring social topics to the table and do it in a way that is conversational and, again, accessible to everyone. And for today's episode, we are discussing DEI, then, now, and the future. And before I introduce our first guest, I'd just like to share, a few community guidelines as to why we're here and how we will aim to behave in today's space. And the first one is, everyone is welcome here. This webinar is not meant for only leaders or people who are involved in the community. This space is really meant for everyone. The second is bring openness to the table. A lot of times, especially in culture work and in our careers and communities, we talk a lot about barriers. And instead, let's flip it, right, and talk about how we are open with one another and open in the spaces that we are creating that are more accepting and ultimately lead to more fruitful conversations. And the last one is leave with a seed. And that is a little bit of a play on Sembra. If for my non-Spanish speakers in the group, Sembra is a play on the Spanish word meaning to plant. And, what do we plant with? Usually seeds. And so really what that means is leave with something that you can foster and nurture later on, whether that's a connection, a thought, an article, a phrase that someone said that maybe you want to act on later. Whatever that seed is, this is your time to really lean into that seed. So with that, I would like to introduce our speaker, Ms. Netta Jenkins. Netta is the CEO of Aerodei. She is also the author of the Inclusive Organization. She also did a Tedx talk on reimagining the workplace. She's been recognized by many notable publications like Forbes, the Washington Post, and so many others. She continues to serve as an advisor for many entrepreneurs and businesses today. She is a phenomenal speaker and has spoken in many other countries and for many very visible organizations. And we are just so fortunate to have her here. Netta, is there anything else you want to share with the group on your background?
Yeah. Well, first, I just want to start off with thank you so much for creating such a space, right? And this is why I believe in the power of what you're doing, because like you said, you're bringing everyone together, right, from all walks of life. And we're having these open and honest conversations, which the world needs today. And we get to highlight some of the positives and the things that folks are driving impact towards. So I just thank you for creating this space. And thank you for sharing my bio with everyone, and welcome everyone. I guess a little bit about my background. So, both of my parents, and this is something I talk about often, both of my parents are from Liberia. They came to the States in the 80s. And I'm not sure why, but they settled in Johnston, Rhode Island. So, the smallest state in the US and a predominantly white town. And so they were fine, and I was fine for a very long time, riding down the street with my friends and just loving my neighborhood, right? And really not thinking about identity and who I was. Those were not conversations that I was having at that time. But there was a pivotal moment when I had to explore that. And it was at the age of 7. A white woman had walked into our yard. And I was with my mom, and she said, "Blacks don't belong in my neighborhood," and then proceeded to spit in my mother's face. And I watched the phlegm literally drip down my mother's cheek. And I was 7 years old at that time, and I literally did not know what to do in that moment. But I remember vividly, and even now, like as I talk about it, I can remember the feeling that I had. And I could even remember feeling my mom's thoughts, right? And those thoughts I could feel from a young age was, do I react? And we all know that reaction, right? Like someone spits on you, we all know what you would want to do, right? Or do you turn around and just go back into the house? And so the decision that my mom made was to turn around and go back into the house. And I think there's so much to explore there. I share this story with many people, and there was someone that I was speaking to a couple months back. And he was like, "Well, how could she not do anything? Like, if someone did something to me, I would slap them immediately, right?" And I said, "Well, it's a total different dynamic because my mom's not from the US, right? So she came into this country, she's an immigrant. And so she already has her guards up, and she wants to make sure that she does things the right way. But she was also thinking, well, in this situation, would they believe me? Like if I reported it, or if I took action, or if I did end up, if she ended up hitting her, what would happen? Would she be believed?" And so the only decision she could make in that moment was really to turn around, take my hand. We walked back into the house. And I remember going back to the house, and anyone with immigrant parents know you don't really unpack anything, right? And that's not a good thing either. But we didn't unpack it immediately. But I remember going into my room. I got down on my knees and I vowed to never be silent again. And literally at that point, at the age of 7, is when me advocating not just for Black people, but advocating for anything that I saw that was not right, that was not fair, that was not just against anyone, it was all over me. And so it started from a very young age.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Netta. And, Netta, you shared this story in your TED Talk, Reimagining the Workplace, where you shared specifically this experience. And I believe Betsy on our team is sharing that link with everyone. So you could share it in your workplace and have a discussion around it. But, something that really stuck with me in hearing your story is how you took that experience and made it your whole life's purpose. And so can you talk to me just a little bit of, seeing yourself now and your accomplishments and where you are, not only as a DEI leader, but, you are now the CEO of a platform, an AI inclusive platform that now creates solutions for DEI in the workplace and performance. How has that experience or just your work over time shaped your approach to this work and holding and staying true to its validity throughout all of these years?
Yeah. My approach has always been putting people first in everything and all things, right? And so I remember even at a young age of when I was advocating in middle school and high school. There was one class, I had a public speaking class. And I remember there was one of the students had gotten up and he had read a letter that he wrote that was part of the assignment. And everyone started to laugh at him because he had different mannerisms, but he was autistic. And so, of course, here I was in that moment advocating for him, like telling the others that were sitting around, like, don't you do that, don't you dare. But I was also so intrigued with his writing, we became best friends. And so my first organization that I ever launched, and this was in college, it was a casting company. I was like, you're going to be the marketing manager, right? And so we followed each other throughout. And so for me, it has always been, how do I center people, right? How do I make sure that I'm advocating for people um, when there are not fair situations that are happening, but how do I make sure that I also equip people with the tools to do that for someone else, right? How do I scale that? Because I can't be at all places. I mean, we know that there's a lot of unjust things that happen in this world. And so really that is what propelled my work. That's one of the reasons why I got into technology. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to launch a platform, because I knew that I couldn't be the sole person doing all of this. But if I had a technology that could be implemented within organizations around the world that could do this, then I could essentially save lives, because we all know when there are inequities that you're facing or there is a lack of fairness, and that's for anyone, sometimes you feel alone. It dictates the amount of food you can put on, your plate for you and your family. It dictates the amount of funding that comes through, right? So there's just so much that it dictates in one's life. And so with my platform, it was, how can I make sure that I'm reaching as many people as possible and putting them first?
Yeah. And I love the tie to human. At the end of the day, we're humans and
Yeah.
we can't be everywhere at once, but this is about every single person and addressing, their experience and making it a more equitable place. For everyone, yes, we recognize that people need different solutions, and there are, systemic, issues and barriers that need to be addressed. But ultimately, this work is not for one group and set of people. I think I learned that very early on. I grew up in a low income community, and I saw, very low graduation rates at a young age.
Mhm.
Was the first person in my family to go to college. And once I got there and went through everything, I didn't feel like I fit anywhere. I failed out my first semester, thought I wanted to be a psychiatrist because thought my parents would want their, daughter to be a doctor. And, they immigrated here from Mexico in their early teens. And I just remember crying and thinking, what am I going to do with my life? And there's so much expectation of me, but I don't feel I'm learning from anyone. I don't feel supported. Yes, I had friends, but I didn't see leaders who looked like me and who were doing the type of work that I wanted to do. And
Yeah.
so I took my first internship in Chicago when I was 20 years old at Chicago Foundation for Women. And what did that teach me? That women have been going through it for so many years. And
Mhm.
I saw myself as that woman. And it just felt so amazing to be around feminist energy that really just wanted to make the world a better place. And if y'all want to look them up and see what they do, they're still thriving today, and they grant out millions for women and girls across the city and nationally. So I think part of this too is, us describing this is not to define DEI, because there's so many ways of defining it, but defining it in a sense of it's part of who we are. It's not a textbook agenda or phrase that we can pull out, although, we do define it in terms of, for the sake of understanding, but it's so much more than that. Can you talk a little bit more about just the human behavior and how really the way that we saw DEI manifest so quickly in 2020, specifically after, the murder of Mr. Floyd, and the complete shift we're seeing now, or even it already, let's be honest, has been happening over the last year. That was a tremendous rise and a tremendous fall in such a quick period of time when we were just starting to get to the bones of having people understand what we're actually doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the expectations were set so high, right? After something massive that had happened when the world was on pause, organizations have realized, oh my goodness, we haven't done anything and we need to take action on this. And a lot of leaders wanted to take action, but I think the expectation was we'll take action on this, and yeah, in a couple of months we'll see a massive change. We'll see the increased representation. We'll see the funding come in and pour in. We'll see new customer acquisition. We'll see all of these things that we're reading about that talk about how diversity, equity, and inclusion is a great thing, right? And we saw that the total opposite happen. And I think what is really interesting about all of this is there were so many people that wanted to see that shift, but again, based on the expectation of, well, this needs to happen in a short amount of time, now people are fizzling away and saying, well, it doesn't work. And the thing that I know, just having a background in behavioral psychology and communications, to shift human behavior is one of the most difficult things to do. It takes a very, very long time. And essentially, when we talk about DEI, it's about human behavior. It's the behaviors that we have all had due to our experiences that we then bring with us within the workplace, within every facet of our life. And then we have to kind of shift and change, and that takes long. And so I don't know if leaders were prepared for that. And typically what happens is typical human behavior. If you're not prepared for something, you either want to rush it or you delete it. What I also typically see too is that when we are at the cusp of something truly transformative, that is when divisiveness comes. That is when breakthrough actually happens. And so a lot of people ask me, well, Netta, what do you think about DEI divisiveness that's happening right now? And we see chief diversity officers being laid off, and we see a lot of organizations taking a stance and saying, hey, we're no longer interested. We're no longer doing this. This doesn't matter. It doesn't work. When I see that, I say, we're so close to something so grand, as crazy as that seems, right? Because what has happened is, because of that moment of Mr. George Floyd being murdered and the world watching, we all hold either some guilt in that, if we haven't taken action, if we haven't thought about it, if we hadn't recognized it, when that happened. And we're also saying, okay, well, how do we move forward, right? And I think that's the defining moment that's taking place right now. And what I tell folks all the time is, it's not the time for us to pull back or pull away from this work. We have to continue it. And there's always going to be naysayers. There's always going to be people that say, well, I don't care. Of course, it's typical human behavior, right? Part of this work around DEI does explore the lens of who has been forgotten, right? Who has been forgotten for a very long time. And so that in itself is just interesting, because for folks that have not been forgotten, they can challenge and say, well, this doesn't matter because it doesn't impact them. Right? So part of it is we're preaching to a choir of people that understand inequities and gaps that exist. And then we're also preaching to a population of people that may not experience it. And so why would they grasp the concept, right? And so that took my think DEI is necessary, but DEI also has to be retooled, right? We also have to humanize it to a certain point as well. We have to break down what this means. We have to break down and go to the root of how are people feeling? How are they impacted? How are they not impacted? Why would they even want to care, right? And for them to explore themselves. I think there's just like a lot of exploration that has to happen, but we can't pull away from the work. It just needs to evolve.
Yeah, definitely. I think we could have a full discussion just on that specifically, because, just like everything else, DEI has evolved, right?
Yeah.
Just like we evolve in so many technology, right? In operations, in finance, and other parts of the business, this is no different.
Mhm.
And I think to your point, just taking it back to, connection and how people are feeling,
Yeah.
humanizing leadership, really showcasing empathy. This is the direction that we need to head instead of calling, DEI what it is and circulating misinformation about it.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, and I was going to say that we also, as a community of people, have to come together, right?
Yeah.
Within organizations, and yeah, I know you probably like get to this too, but within the organizations, ERGs exist. But we all have seen ERGs function as siloed organizations. Like it's very rare that you see these groups coming together as a unit. And I believe in the power of people and the power of numbers. Can you imagine how organizations would look if employee resource groups all came together and were all ideating on, okay, what's kind of this one big thing that we want to focus on as a community of people, as opposed to, hey, we have, the LGBTQIA plus group, and now we have the Black group, and we have the Hispanic Latina group, and there's so many different groups of people fighting for their own thing, but not coming together. And so what organizations are able to do is separate that, right? It's like, well, it's almost like a segregated type of experience when we do explore it. And so I think that in itself has to evolve as well.
Yeah. And taking it a step back to say, why do ERGs exist? What is their purpose and role? I think even from that foundation, companies need to do a better job of explaining. And that's not the job of just the DEI person. That's
Mhm.
the job of every single leader at your organization. If leaders and people are confused as to why the ERGs exist, then that means there needs to be some re-education and defining, those measures for your company.
Yeah.
Um, so I love that. And my follow-up question was just going to be, is it worth still doing that? I think some of that is under fire. Some of these, DEI check the box. I hate using that terminology, but let's call it what it is. Having ERGs, having diverse pipelines, looking at your job descriptions, but specifically because we are talking about, groups of people, do you feel this is moving the needle? Are there better ways that we could be investing our time in our orgs who are doing this?
Yeah. I think so going back to ERGs, I'm always torn about this because one, my perspective on one end is yes, absolutely. People need safe spaces. There's nothing like identifying with a population of people, especially if there's few within an organization and being like, ooh, yes. All right, let me talk this out. Here's my experience. Here's what I went through. Okay, I'm rebooted, and now I'm more productive throughout the day. I think that's good for people to kind of lean on each other in that way, and that serves as a community. On the flip side, I also see the division and the segregation that then happens within organizations. And so you still end up having pockets of people that are still forgotten about, even though there are all these different events that are populating, you're essentially what I find is many ERGs are also begging like, hey, come to this event. Here's what we're doing. And you get tired and you're not recognized, right? At the end of the day. And then many people end up saying, well, I don't even need to be a part of it. I'm not being impacted. Let me just go lean on my friend that identifies as me that I can talk to, right? So I'm still trying to find this middle ground myself because I do believe it's important to have people to lean on within an organization. But I think most importantly is people need to be able to advance within organizations. And if an ERG cannot serve as a platform for people to actually be able to advance, for people to be connected to leaders, senior leaders, and be exposed to things that they typically aren't, then what is it really serving? Right.
100%.
Yeah.
Megan said, I love the idea of bringing ERGs together to focus on the mission as a collective unit instead of siloed. I think that's maybe one step that we can look at in the interim.
Yeah. Well, that's how movements start. You have a body, a population of people coming together. When we see people protesting, right, for various things, you see a number of people from different, right, from different populations coming together. After the murder of Mr. George Floyd, you saw people from all walks of life, all ages coming together, right, no matter how they identified, and women's rights and different movements, right? But that's when we see a lot of change happen. And I can only imagine what would happen to organizations if that type of route was taken.
Yeah. No, 100% agree. I just had a visual of that time, and I hadn't thought about it in a while, and it's taking me back.
Mhm,
Um, I think, something else too, and we can't talk about the fall without talking about the misinformation, specifically from leaders in our country,
mhm,
and both at the corporate level, the political level, and even influencers, right? People who carry a lot of weight. And actually ties to one of the questions that we did get in the chat is Yvonne lives in a red state, and she feels like there's often roadblocks, and if we have any recommendations for navigating this. But before you answer that, Netta, I think I want to also address, you spoke out about this on your LinkedIn, and we'll share Netta's LinkedIn information if you don't follow her. You posted a video after the incident, a bridge collapse that happened in Maryland. And there was a
mhm,
twofold situation that happened with that tragedy. One, we saw a roar of community and people, specifically on social media,
yeah,
around the workers who, are immigrant men and felt that their lives weren't as, significant of a loss because they didn't belong here in the first place. And these are
yeah,
comments that are out there for people to read right now. The second part is you had, state representatives and other leaders knocking
mhm,
DEI and diminishing the fact that there is a young Black man as the mayor. And so we had this twofold, really real time view of how racist our country is. And to your point earlier, that we need to stand firm on our ground, not only just in DEI, but just as people and people who want to do the right thing. So can you
yeah.
share just a little bit of what that video was and just kind of your take on that entire situation?
Yeah, definitely. So many of you, I'm sure, heard about the Baltimore Bridge collapse after its support column was struck by I believe it was a cargo ship, and it was early morning on March 26th. And what happened was it sent 8 construction workers directly into the river. And I believe it was reported that 6 of those workers were killed. Um, and that in itself, like the humanity just in that and how that was handled was divisive, right? Like you said, there were lawmakers that were coming out and saying nasty things. Um, Social media is evil at times, right? There were a lot of racist things that were being stated, especially about those that had passed, which was really troubling. And then from the other end, like you said, Jasmin, then there's the mayor of Baltimore, and he's a Black man. The governor of Maryland is a Black man as well. And so a Utah lawmaker had ended up stating this is what happens when you have governors that prioritize diversity over the well being and security over citizens. It just didn't even make sense. like it didn't even make sense, right? In fact, when I had heard about it and I read it, I laughed out of anger because I'm just like this, like, how could you say such a thing at such a fragile moment in time, right? And so again, this quote comes from a Utah lawmaker running for governor who essentially opportunistically used the Baltimore Bridge tragedy as a way to point blame at, and then also discredit qualified Black leadership as if they were the ones that crashed the ship and concocted the entire thing, right? And so I share all of that just to say the media plays such a large role. And I share that because just a couple weeks ago, I had a conversation with a reporter from a pretty notable publication. I won't name the name. And I was pitching a positive story. I was like, hey, here's a positive story in this world where there's so much evil and so much negativity. People need to see that there are still people taking action, doing great things. Men of all races, women of all races, like all genders, right, are doing incredible things. Let's highlight that. And he said to me, he said, Netta, he's like, unfortunately, I can only highlight the negative things that are happening right now. That is the only thing that my management team wants us to work on. And right there and then, I always knew that media could dictate and create the narratives, right? But right there and then, it was just so powerful that we cannot get caught up in these headlines. And I've done it because I'll look at a headline, I'm like, ooh, that's what happened. Oh my God, the world is going down, right? And I have to take a step back and I have to challenge myself and say, but no, Netta, read. Don't get stuck in the headline, read, right? And read from all sources. And that's what I definitely will say to all of you. Make sure you don't get stuck in the headlines because it's easy to do that. And that's when it's a very lazy behavior. That's when people draw their own perspectives off of the headline. And so with a lawmaker running for governor stating something like that, someone that's not knowledgeable, someone that's not aware of themselves, aware of the world that they've even been a part of and how they've contributed, could easily say, well, see, yep, that's it. It's because Black leadership, or well, you see, well, the population of people that were killed are, Latino men. It's okay, right? So people can then make that or create that narrative. And so we all have to kind of educate ourselves and educate those around us as well.
100%. How about in terms of, people who are living in red states that have, the ability to show up in policy changes, specifically in education, or even financial institutions, health systems. I mean, there's so many crossover points with DEI work and legislation. I guess, what would be your advice when in someone like in that position, having to deal with, different legislative changes coming that you really don't have control over?
Yeah, definitely. Again, I always say I believe in the power of people and numbers. So don't do it alone, right? Change will not happen just you doing it alone. Definitely start to identify who are those people in your neighborhood, who are those people that live close by, right? That you're connected to. What are some of those groups that you can join that are already kind of lobbying to kind of dispute some of these things that may be coming to pass, right? Those are the types of conversations and groups that you want to be a part of and movements that you want to be a part of. And if you want to create your own, go ahead and do so, but don't do it alone. When we do anything alone, it becomes very, very overwhelming. And I remember, I started off young and advocating for various things. And I remember having a breaking point of, I don't even want to do this anymore. I'm tired, and it was because I was trying to do this alone when I had to be a part of a community of people doing it. So that is the advice I would share.
I love that. And for me, as I look at some of the change that I've been able to curate or be part of, it's community. It's finding people who are facing those issues head on, who you identify with, who give you the space and allow you the space to bring forth ideas and actions. And ultimately, this is what Sembra is building, right? We're building spaces for people to further their education and to advocate and to be leaders of change in their communities. And so thank you for allowing me to plug that shamelessly at that point. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Aerodei. Aerodei is a new organization. You are the CEO. And something that I wanted to bring up in this discussion is that you are that at the realm of a platform that all of these companies 2 years ago were so anxious for. They wanted something to track the ROI and track the actions of their people, track the DEI work and the behaviors that people were taking in the workplace. And now that platform is here, and I would like for you to educate the group on it as you're still in the phase of educating, right, the community as to what it is. And yeah, talk to us about how it's going and how you've navigated through kind of the time we're in, with hesitation in terms of even taking that next step with data and analytics from a DEI standpoint.
Yeah, definitely. So I had to take a step back myself. When I think about DEI, my fight is a little bit different these days. I used to be very like head on with it. And now that I have a technology, I had to think about, I don't want to have to keep on training people on how to be just a good person. Because essentially that's what I'm doing, right? Be a good human being, right? Yeah. Be a decent citizen in this world. But for me, it was, if I'm not around educating people, then can I create a tool that that organizations love to utilize, but we know are all ineffective and that bring the greatest amount of bias and are very time consuming? And so that's performance reviews. Performance reviews dictate a person's path and career in life, right? It's engagement surveys. Folks are hounded by the HR person. Take this, and you're just like, oh, great. I mean, you can't even pay me. Amazon, I love Amazon. I'm always shopping on Amazon. But even if Amazon said, hey, Netta, get a free gift card, I don't want to take a survey, right? We all bypass them. So engagement surveys are kind of like a thing of the past, right? And then goal setting. Goal setting is also something that dictates our path. If it's not measurable, it's very hard for you to then move up within an organization. And so thinking about the tools and systems that organizations love to use empowered me to say, okay, I'm going to take those very tools and make it as inclusive as possible so that no matter who you are, you have the ability to advance. But also when I take a look at marginalized, overlooked groups, they will really have a fair chance to advance with these tools. And so for the performance review feature that we are embedding, an employee does not have to think about every single thing that they've done throughout the year, right? A manager doesn't even have to think about every single thing. In real time, you can ask for feedback as you're working on a project. And through AI, what we do is we create that digital footprint. So now when performance reviews come around, your manager has a summary of, hey, what have you done successfully? What can you improve upon? And Aerodei is also providing that advice. Hey, you may want to think about this person for succession planning, or to be your number two, or you may want to think about this person for this role. Here are some behaviors and competencies and values your organization has identified as important that this person aligns to. Right. So now it's not even that manager incorporating their own bias into what they think. Oh, I'm sorry, you need more executive presence. No, well, based on all the work I've done, that's not what's happening here, right? So that's a performance review feature. Then there is our goal setting feature. And today it's really about quantifying inclusive actions. So for every action that someone takes within an organization, they should receive the recognition, and it should also be quantified and should be built into their review as well. So we're also kind of incorporating that, and it allows an entire organization to now see this work as expansive, right? Because a lot of people, when they think about DEI, the number one thing they think about is diversity recruiting. Oh, yeah. DEI, here we go again. We have to do diversity recruiting, right? And we all know it's more expansive than that, although like there's certain pockets of obviously doing that work as well. And so what about that manager that is having coffee and bagel with their team every Friday And because they do that, they've learned everything about their team members. So they know, hey, we're not going to go out to the bar and just do drinks, because we know that there's someone or a couple members on our team that don't drink because of religious reasons, right? So now you start to really kind of understand, but that manager should also gain the recognition, and employees should be able to gain the recognition as well if they're driving that impact. And then engagement surveys, like I said, is a thing of the past. So we're developing a sentiment tool. So every day, as a user, you can say, hey, here's how my day is going. It could have no relation to your impact within the company, right? Or it may not be, oh, my manager was terrible or a peer was terrible. It could be, hey, this societal thing happened and I'm not feeling good right now, right? But what will happen is a manager will be able to see, my team has been in the red. My team has not been feeling hot the entire week. I haven't checked in. So now you're alerted, hey, make sure you check in. Here are some of the sentiments that's coming, right? Or maybe it's the organization had a layoff. A number of people were laid off of the team, and there's these 4 people left. Here's how they are feeling. They're on the verge of leaving, right? Here are some things that you want to share with them. Here's how you can re-engage them and share, hey, remember your path forward here. Here's the next step that I want to take you to, right? So there's a compilation of things, but for me, it's really about, how do I now target the tools that organizations love to utilize that are ineffective and make it work for everyone, especially those that have been forgotten for a very long time.
Yeah. I love to hear about Aerodei because it's not a blanket tool. It's not, a tool just for a specific DEIB initiative. It's truly for all of your systems internally, and to really embed the outcomes that come out of it. So thank you for sharing. We'll drop the link in case anyone wants to learn about Aerodei, or if anyone here is in HR and wants to book something to learn more. I realize we are at time already. Time flew by. So maybe just one last word or statement, and it has come up, is, what can people do? I know we all want, to drive outcomes, and we want to support and help, right? We don't want to just, stand around. What would you say, if you had to leave this meeting, like, what is something we can all be doing?
I think the biggest thing is we all have to do the self-work, right? We have to, even me, this is something I'm doing right now. We have to go back to the drawing board and identify, who are we, right? What are some things within, whether it be our childhood or even now, that have impacted us and our decisions and the perspectives that we have? And what type of human do we want to be? And I ask myself those questions almost every day, right? Because I shared my experience as a young child and the experience I went through with my mom. And I had to realize that there was an element of guilt that I carry with me, right? This is why I push so hard. It's almost like, because of that incident and that situation, I'm trying to fulfill this gap of not standing up. So I do it for everyone, right? And I had to challenge myself with, hold on, Netta, take a step back. Why are you really doing this? And what type of human do you want to be? And what type of impact do you want to have? And on who, right? And so when I think about that, it's like, well, I want all people impacted, right? At the end of the day, but I really want to make sure that those that have been overlooked and forgotten for such a long time can advance. And that has now renewed and has helped me to shape my purpose. So that's what I share with everyone. Go back to the drawing board and really kind of identify, take a Sunday to just reflect, like, what experiences have shaped you and your perspective? What makes you angry? What makes you sad? What makes you cry? What makes you happy, right? And what type of human do you want to be?
That's incredible and such a takeaway. ourselves. It's about you, it's about your journey. And I think that's, ultimately how we start to drive change, because it starts with us. And when we send out this recording, I will share an exercise that talks about identity. I use it for my own trainings, and it really helps you identify what are your privileges, what have your experiences taught you, where do you feel you need support in learning about, right? What does your circle look like? I think all of these things can help us as we continue on this path. This path is nowhere near over, and to your point earlier, now is the time where we stand firm and continue the work that we do. Thank you so much. Any final words from you, Netta?
No, I'm just so happy that I said no and then I continue, right? I am so happy that everyone has joined this session. Like, I really believe in being in spaces and places at the right time. And so I'm excited that each of you are part of this. And I know that each of you will be able to drive the impact that you want to see, right? And don't allow anyone else to dictate that for you. What is it that you want to see? And I'm here to support you along the way. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn as well.
Yes, please connect with us. Stay involved with both Netta, myself, Aerodei, Sembra. We're here to support you. And stay tuned for next month for our mental health focused growth webinar. And we will communicate that out in a few weeks. But thank you, Netta, so much. We appreciate your time. You are incredible. You're a force. And I'm so lucky as an emerging leader myself. And being in this space with you, it's an honor. So thank you, all of you, for joining, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you.